Loss comes in many forms, and usually in unexpected ways. It can be devastating, leaving you facing an uphill struggle to go on with life without someone you thought would always be there. But life does go on, and even in the deepest despair, we can find hope. Welcome to Grief Relief with your hosts, Drs. Gloria and Heidi Horsley, brought to you by the Open to Hope Foundation, helping people find hope after loss. And now here's Dr. Gloria and Dr. Heidi.
Welcome to the Open to Hope show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we have got a really important show today because we know that there's been a lot of trauma in your community and in the nation. I mean, if you live in the Newtown area or Boston area, it's really impacted everyone in the whole nation, all the things that have gone on and all the trauma. And Heidi, we've got some great guests today to talk about that because we have Liz Creel, and we met Liz. I met her with the 9/11 Project with Columbia University, where we were visiting families who had had trauma in a research study, the fire department, right, Heidi?
Yes, I've got to put a plug in for Liz because Liz is one of my dearest friends. I have known her for many years. We have worked together since 2002, like you said, with firefighter families. We did a longitudinal study. You were in part of them, where we worked with firefighter families over time and looked at traumatic loss.
And we should mention Grace Christ, right?
Right, looked at how they found hope, and it was run by Dr. Grace Christ, who was a former professor of mine. So yes, I've known Liz forever. We've presented together a lot. We've done a lot of workshops and a lot of work together.
Yeah, and she is great, and we'll be talking to her about trauma and recovery. And then we've got Dr. Dan Rudafossi, and what an amazing guy he is. He's the cop doc. He's been a sergeant in the police, and he's an amazing guy, Dr. Dan.
What I love about Dr. Dan is he wears two hats. He's a cop and he's a psychologist. So he can bring in a whole nother level as far as trauma, and he's worked a lot with trauma because the police deal a lot with traumatic things every single day.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to talk to him about is this reoccurring trauma where you've been traumatized, you haven't dealt with it, and re-traumatized. Because, you know, I live in San Francisco and Heidi lives in New York, and we get together to do the show. And when the earthquake happened in San Francisco a few years ago, I was kind of, well, I hate to say a bit amused, where they were asking everybody, all the therapists in the Bay Area, to come and help people who'd been in the earthquake. When everybody had been in the earthquake.
Right.
I mean, it's really interesting what police and therapists are asked to do. Suddenly, they're not just a person out there, they're somebody who has to go heal trauma, and healing your own is
Well, it is interesting when
you've
you've been through an event like 9/11 or an earthquake, and then you go and work with families that have too, but you've also had your own trauma. And the other thing, Mom, that Liz and Dr. Dan do that they both have in common is that they work with vets that have had trauma.
Right, so we're going to learn a lot from them today. And then we've got some great music, Heidi. We've got Kate Mills, and she is a singer-songwriter, and she is going to sing Say Something. And Kate told us that she got this song, her friend had a trauma, and helping her through the trauma, so it was Say Something. So music's so healing, isn't it, Heidi?
It absolutely is, and it brings us to another level, and we've had Kate on before, and her music is really incredible.
Yeah, she's great. So let's get started by talking to Liz.
Okay.
Hey,
Hey, Liz.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome.
So
Thank
great to have
you.
you on today, Liz.
Very
And
happy
I
to be
know, you know, let's just start out quickly with your own personal trauma that you had a few years ago.
Yeah, it's actually, you know, Heidi and I had been working together till about 2007, and right after that, my husband had died suddenly in a tragic swimming accident, a drowning accident, in Florida, in Miami, when he was on vacation with my son, who was 16 at the time. So it was totally
And you'd been working in
surprise.
trauma.
Just
and
working in
suddenly
trauma.
And
you have the trauma.
she'd been working with widows. And I remember
Right.
shortly after Larry died, you called me and said, Heidi, I had no idea that for years and years I'd worked with widows and I would be preparing for my own loss.
I said that, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember, but I
Yes,
think
you said that.
that was very true. And when you're in it, though, and
It's
your
different.
experience, it's a different experience.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that we're saying this because when Scott was killed, my 17-year-old son and Heidi's brother, I was teaching at the University of Rochester School of Nursing, and I was the surgical person for the entire surgical service, and I worked on burn units. I worked in families where there were automobile accidents. I worked in all sorts of things, and then my son was killed in that type of an accident. And wow, I remember saying, I thought I knew something about it, and I do. I think you have helpful things. I don't want to minimize. You don't have to have all the experiences to help people. But personally, what it brings to you on that level is unbelievable.
Yeah. And having children, you know, and having to, of course, with the 9/11 Project, as well as with my own experience and everybody else's experience, where there are children that you're responsible for, that's the first thing you want to figure out how to do, is how to help them. And I know the widows, that was why they let us come and work with them on that project. And, you know, you may know a lot of stuff by the book when it comes to your own children. I would have to say that over the last 5.5 years, it's been learning by doing. You know, keep evolving, keep trying to keep communication going, and trying to understand, you know, where they're at.
And you had 2 teenage boys, Jesse and
Yes.
Dylan, at the time. They were teenagers at the time.
16 and 14.
And Mom, your kids were 20, 19, and 14. So you guys both had the whole teenage. The teenage years are rough enough, and then you put a sudden loss on top of that.
Yeah.
Now, your 16-year-old was there, though.
Yes.
So let me ask
Yes.
you, for people who have had the trauma where they've been there, or someone has been there, did you find anything for your 16-year-old that you had to deal with differently?
You know, one of the things about Jesse is, you know, I think it's important to always think about who they are as a person before the trauma occurred, because that's how they also go through the trauma. And Jesse was someone, as compared to my other son Dylan, Jesse was less talkative, less communicative with me, anyhow, I would say. He's very communicative and social with his friends. So when this happened, that continued. You see, he was still kind of non-communicative with me. So we had to find other ways to help him talk about that experience, and we did. We sought out therapy at that time. But I would have to say, and I'm a therapist, that that wasn't the most successful experience for him. He tried it because I suggested it, but I think to this day he's still continuing.
That's interesting you should say that, because I ended up getting I had 3 daughters, and I got Heidi into therapy, and her older sister. I think they all went once, and it was like, no, right?
It wasn't helpful for me, and it may have been because I was not a good fit with the person that my therapist, but I didn't find it helpful. I found it more helpful to talk to friends, especially those that had had a loss.
Right.
And I don't know what did you find was helpful with Jesse?
With Jesse, absolutely things that we often find helpful for ourselves as adults. Having friends around was very key. Having family around was very key. He's very close. We were very close with Larry's brother. So we've been seeing and being very close with Larry's brother since this happened. And he comes over every week, twice a week, plays chess with the boys.
What's his name?
Mark.
Mark, thank you.
That's wonderful.
You're a great guy.
Yeah, he's really good. He's really good.
That's really
so
great to hear.
I think that that provided some sort of continuity, connection to Larry through his brother. A male figure I found was very important. You know, I'm kind of okay. You know, I've got some social skills. I can talk to them, but it's not the same as having a male figure.
Right. Well, speaking of male figures, we're going to have Dr. Dan on right now, and I know you've talked to him earlier,
Yes,
Liz, and
very
you and
interesting.
he have a lot in common. So Dan's made a video for us, and talking a little bit about his work with the police department and some of the trauma work he does. So let's see that video, and then we'll introduce Dr. Dan. Cool. Okay.
Working with Traumatized Police Officer Patients is my first book, published in 2007. It's a guide that's good for those of you who are peer support officers, responding to situations where you help other officers in need, and if you're a clinician dealing with cops. Really great book by Baywood Press. I suggest you pick it up and read it if you want to work with other cops and other EMTs, firefighters, returning veterans, special forces, and get an idea about complex PTSD in the full spectrum. Again, working with traumatized police officer patients, Baywood Press.
Hey, Dr. Dan.
Hi, nice to see you.
Hello, Dr. Dan.
Great to have you on.
Hi. Wonderful to be here.
It's great to have you on, and we've had you on our radio show too.
Yes,
Yeah.
we
We did
have.
a great spot with you. People can find it on our website, opentohope.com. And there he is. And here's a couple of books, Dan. I want to make sure we show people these books because they got a lot of great information. A Cop Doc's Guide to Understanding Terrorism and Human Evil.
Wow.
Wow, that's a real
intense.
current one of stuff that's going on. And then another one you brought here is A Street Survival Guide for Public Safety Officers. The Cop Doc Strategies for Surviving Trauma, Loss, and Terrorism. Whoa, you really get into it heavy.
You do.
I have to because I've had probably at least 1,000 or more police officers over the past 15 years that have been highly traumatized. And the title of this book, Cop Doc's Guide to Understanding Terrorism as Human Evil, was worked on quite a while in my head when I was working as the DEA chief psychologist or administrative psychologist. One of the things that bother police and public safety officers and veterans is that when they hear the media present trauma or terrorism, for example, something that just happens and goes away, as we were talking about loss and trauma, something that's hidden. Well, for the officers that respond, for example, to Boston, you better believe a lot of them are going to suffer for trauma. And as we were talking earlier, I quoted something from my earlier work with Baywood, working with traumatized police officer patients, A Cop Doc's Guide, the first book. And it's funny, my boss, Inspector Werpke, who later became the head of the medical division, loved the book, and the piece that he quoted, I didn't even realize I had written because there's so much I'm writing and working on. And in there I said something to the effect of, it is an illusion to put a time frame on how often a police officer should be seen and working through trauma, loss, and terrorism. And it is a delusion to try to enforce that, or something in substance like that.
You know what's coming up for me when you're saying that is that taking any person and slotting them into, okay, you need to have this, particularly where people are firemen or policemen or what, as you say, setting up a program for them. But we were talking about Liz, about her kids, even setting up a program for your kids, trying to get them into therapy. Everybody needs to go into therapy at this certain time. And people may need to just tell their story, right?
Absolutely. As Professor Liz was saying, they have to tell their story. They have to have the amount of time. And a key point is that one cannot prescribe, but rather proscribe a time frame, because who's to say how long it takes to actually unravel and to help the person reposition their loss inside of their lives. I mean, besides being a cop doc, I'm also a psychologist and professor, so I deal with loss and trauma all the time.
So if I'm sitting there listening to you right now, and maybe I was a policeman in the past, and maybe I'm not even that anymore, or a psychologist or whatever, and then my spouse dies, there may be those experiences from way back in other lives. I've got to unravel.
What a key point. In one of the works, I'm trying to remember which one, I think it's using 5 police personality styles, A Cop Doc's Guide. I talk about telescoping of trauma, and here an inspector or a high-ranking officer was in session with me talking about something present. And then he started to look up, and his eyes started to flitter like I'm doing it now. And I said, what's up? What's going on? Talk to me. Talk to me is a great way to get it in. Just down or talk to me. He says, nothing, Doc, nothing really. And it's stupid. I don't want to talk about it. I said, do me a favor. Talk to me in a real way. What's going on?
Oh, wait a minute. I've got to stop right there. When you say, talk to me in a real way. What do you think? I've never heard anybody say that.
I haven't either.
It's good though, isn't it?
Because I'm a cop too. And the way that you deal with people when you do hostage negotiation, anything like that, is talk to me, be real. Tell me what's going on, buddy. What's the matter? What's the matter? And saying it like that, of course I can say in another way, like, what's the matter, Ms. or whoever, or Mr. No. But you say, what's the matter with that accent? You want somebody to open up. Truly.
Does it have to be with the New York accent,
It
Dan?
does. It absolutely has to be, right? So what's the matter? Anyhow, all joking aside, folks, what happened was he started to telescope back to somewhere in the 1970s up in the Bronx, where his partner that he was working with is a rookie cop. Now think about this, is like 20, 30 something years earlier, and in eidetic detail. In other words, his memory was photographic, and tell me about Sutton Boulevard, where this shooting had taken place, and his buddy, who was a partner, got shot in the chest with a .44 Magnum. He had been holding this grief for 30 years, and this is a key. When his partner got shot, he did everything that a cop's supposed to do. He got down to cover, pulled out his .38 at the time, and he tried to pull him out, but he couldn't because the guy was shooting with a .44 Magnum. To give you a hint, it's like hearing a jet engine going off in your face and ears. Anyhow, this hero called himself a coward because he couldn't talk about it all these years. He lived with feeling like he was a coward, had gone in and then grabbed him and pulled him out, dragging him on the radio, calling, got him into the R&P or the patrol car with others, and he looked at him and he said to him, Jay, his name, he says, "Where's my mommy?" He says, where's my mother? And he actually had, it's just heart-rending, folks. When he was sharing with me, you can't but feel the emotion, the intensity, that while this officer was dying, and he looked at him, he says, "Buddy, I'm here for you, brother, I'm here," and hold him. And I said to him that one of the losses is not only thinking about himself like a coward, but what was gained out of it was that he was able to give his partner relief in the worst moment in his life. And I said, how did he respond? And he hugged him, and there were tears that were exchanged. And I said, that's the key of what you did. You're not only a hero, you pulled him out, you did everything right, but you also gave him comfort and let him say goodbye in a way that was dignified with meaning from the passage of life into death.
Okay, so what I'm getting from this story, which is an incredible story, is reframing your stories. Telling people who are professionals like you and Liz, if you've really had that heavy-duty trauma, I know you both work with the military, telling your story to people who can help you reframe it in ways
and pulling out the positive, like you're saying, Mom, so that they're not caught in the trauma narrative.
Around and around.
And the disenfranchised losses, which is so key in grieving, the aspect that you don't talk about. I'm a cop, I got to be strong.
Disenfranchised means cutting off, moving away, separating, compartmentalizing off, right?
Exactly.
Taking those things. Okay, when we talk about, there's a lot of talk about disenfranchised grief, but it's when we don't acknowledge and accept that it is a loss for us personally.
Exactly. And one of the terms that I've used is adaptive functional dissociation with police and public safety and military.
Oh, wait a minute, so they adapt to it so they can keep working.
And function. So when you ask a cop or a firefighter or an EMT, how are you doing, Mary? I'm fine. You know what? Joe is the one who's having problems, so you ought to talk to him, Doc. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Right, because I'm the one that gets promoted. Right. Yeah. Well, let's go out to the audience. I think we got a couple of questions for these folks. Heidi?
Where are you?
Got one right there.
This question's for Dan. Do you feel that the police get enough respect?
Absolutely not. I think one of the issues that need to be addressed is we talk about community policing, but we need to have communities understand the trauma, the loss, the disenfranchised aspects that police yearn for. Going by and instead of saying pig or you did a horrible job or second guessing, to try to understand empathically what officers actually go through can go a long way in educating communities to hook up with the police that are working in there, giving their lives, and to understand too, this is a great question, that police are part of their community. So your son or daughter or a family member could become a police officer too, or anyone in public safety, firefighter, EMT, and that the community owes that in a civic way and in civic virtue, which is hardly ever spoken about.
Wow. Well, Dr. Dan, I just want to tell you, when I see police officers, I often just thank them randomly for doing the work they're doing because I feel like oftentimes they don't get that kind of appreciation.
Which is really wonderful, because at that time too, you're saying as a community, I appreciate that you are putting your life on the line for me, and I may be a stranger, but in the next moment you may actually die going into a building rescuing me, whether you're a firefighter, EMT, or police, or even public safety like in universities.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Very welcome.
Well, I think that's really important because it also helps them to reframe their story. You know, we were talking about disenfranchisement, what people really care about what I did. They care about what I'm doing, and that gives them a new a feeling about themselves, which is an important aspect. We've got another question here.
My question's for Liz. What do you recommend I do to help my neighbor whose husband was killed in an auto accident?
Oh, God. Okay. Well, one of the things that I think is really key is it's so traumatic, and I think I said earlier that the most important thing that I found was having friends, family, anything that you consider supportive, to have, if you're a friend, to be there for that person, just listening, being available, bringing food over, and waiting and listening to asking her what she thinks she needs. Because I think sometimes we rush in because we love them, we care about people, and we have this idea of what might be helpful. But I think sometimes we forget to ask the person, and again, maybe not immediately after the trauma and the loss, because they're sort of very lost and very scared, but as time goes on, to really be in touch with them, to ask them, what do you think I can do? What do you think might be helpful for you? So I think it's the combination of just being available, bringing food over. I remember that was, I've done that for other families, and people did that for me. It shows your support. You're around. You're not alone. I think that's very key.
I think that is really important, and thank you very much for the questions and for the audience. We grieve in community, and that's what this whole show is about. Grief relief is that we're a community here. You guys, we're all part of it. We don't grieve alone. Particularly with the internet and all that, we're even more in community now, which is a pretty great thing. Well, we want to thank you for being part of our community today at Grief Relief and for being on the show.
Thank you.
You guys are doing great work.
I just like to say also, I really feel privileged, and if any cop is watching this, or firefighter, public safety, military, this is a station to go to, because I feel that this gives a forum to be able to talk about losses and just listening, where it is very disenfranchised from the population, period, but there is places to go for help, and I think that what you're doing is fantastic, and a privilege to be on with my colleague as well.
Can I just add one quick thing?
Absolutely.
Very quick. We got to have our...
Very quick is, even if the person isn't able to talk about it initially after the trauma, they may start talking about it 2, 3, 4 years later, and that could also be, whenever they're ready, that is the time.
And that's why it's great to have the internet and community and have you folks on. And now we're going to have Kate Mills, our singer-songwriter, and you can find Kate Mills on the internet under Kate Mills Singer-Songwriter, so please do that. And she will now play her song, Something to Say.
One more lonely night, what's the big deal? This feeling is right, this feeling is real. This twisting, turning, piercing, burning just won't go away. And even though you're not listening, I got something to say. I've been looked over and under for long enough now, and I've been beaten, mistreated, abused, but somehow a broken heart, a broken back can't keep me away. And even though you're not listening, I got something to say about the way things should have been, and the nightmare that played out instead. Something to say about the ghost that visits me, and the memories burned in your doormat, the game that you rig. I'm not the one you make small so that you can feel big. And yes, I found the words, not that the pain's gone away. Oh well, it's time you start listening. I got something to say. Something to say about the silence that remains and the tension that has stayed. Though I fought through, nothing can change the truth. No, nothing will ever change you. I'll always know the truth. Still your door is closed, your heart's followed suit, but the question is posed if the point remains moot. So pretend if you like that this will all fade away. And even though you're not listening, I got something to say.
Definitely, it's all good, right?
I like what
Thank
you said
That's
about
great.
the
Okay.
about the police.
Like what?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we could come in and do a military one.